We will call this evening's hearing to order. Hi. My name is Joan Woodard, and I'm your hearing examiner this evening. The purpose of this hearing is to allow me to receive evidence and testimony on the matters that are pending. I make a recommendation only to the county commissioners. I do not make the final decision. I will be submitting my recommendation to staff within 2 weeks of this evening's hearing. The application will then be scheduled for deliberations before the county commissioners. If you wish to give testimony, I need you to fill out one of the sheets in the back, and when you come to the podium, please give your name and address for the record before you begin your testimony. We will also listen to those who are on Zoom after we've heard the public present. First, staff will introduce the application, then we will hear from the applicant. After the applicant's testimony, we will then get into the public comment sheets. We will hear from those who are in favor, those who are neutral, and then those who are opposed. The public not speaking will be read into the record. We will then give the applicant and/or their representative an opportunity for rebuttal of any testimony stated into the record from the public before we close the public hearing. After that point, we will receive no more testimony. The time limits are 30 minutes for the applicant's presentation, 5 minutes for public testimony, and 15 minutes for applicant rebuttal. I would ask that you direct all of your testimony to me and not to the audience. Are there any questions regarding these proceedings tonight? Not seeing any, we will march on. So our public hearing this evening is on CUP 22-0006. Vlad?
Good evening, Madam Hearing Examiner. For the record, Vlad Finkel with Kootenai County Community Development. This is a request by North Hayden Storage LLC to expand an existing mini storage rental warehouse facility that was originally approved in 2016 under the different ownership. I was the original planner on this case when the subject property was vacant and fully forested. However, there's been a number of improvements on site since then. Just some points of clarification. The original request in 2016 was across the entire property when it was one parcel of land. And it has since been subdivided and created into 3 lots and sold off to different individuals. The current property owner recently purchased the 2 southern lots that were part of the original parcel and has requested to expand the existing facility. The subject property is located at the intersection of Old Highway 95 and Ohio Match Road, precisely on the southwest corner of that intersection in the north part of the county. The property is fairly level. It, as I stated previously, it was heavily vegetated. However, a majority of the vegetation was recently logged, I believe as recent as this year. There is a strip of vegetation that is parallel to the eastern property line along Highway 95, Old Highway 95. There is some vegetation along the northern boundary of the property abutting Ohio Match Road, as well as some limited vegetation along the west side adjacent to the original development that occurred within the last 3 to 4 years. However, a majority of the site south of the existing man-made drainage has been denuded. It appears there's no vegetation along the west side of the property. The parent parcels are zoned rural, and the comp plan designation is suburban. The overall parcel area is approximately 24 acres, a little over 24 acres in size. As you know, the minimum lot size for a storage facility is 5 acres. This is the current state of development on the property. There are 10 existing buildings on the property with an existing office, that a portion of which was converted into caretakers facilities. This was a recent discovery by our building code officials, and this is something that we have discussed with the applicant to address the change to the use of a portion of the building, and that is currently under the review of Panhandle Health District for the expansion of the existing septic facility to address additional effluent discharge from living quarters as well as the office space itself. I would like to add that the original approval in 2016 contemplated, I believe, one less building. There was a total of 9 that were contemplated, and they were supposed to be different size. However, following that approval, the new owner requested a condition modification that modified the size of the buildings and the number of them and increased them to a total of 10 buildings. The code does allow minor modifications to be reviewed and approved by the community development director. It's a discretionary call. We felt that an additional building with, I believe it's one of the smaller buildings on the west side of the property, was an insignificant change that would not create an additional impact such as traffic or compatibility concern that the director approved in 2020. However, the latest request is definitely a major modification and required a full-blown conditional use permit. As you can see, this is the latest proposal. To your left would be north. As you can see, there are 10 existing buildings in the first 2 phases of the original request, and then the applicant is requesting 2 additional phases. The 2 additional phases will comprise of 9 buildings. The buildings will range between 11,300 square feet and 11,700 square feet. They all fall short of 12,000 square foot threshold to require interior sprinkler systems from the fire department. However, even though the size of the building is less than the minimum requirement for interior sprinkler systems, they will still have to comply with the adequate fire suppression requirements in terms of fire flows as well as fire hydrants. So that's really a non-issue. I just wanted to point out that we have seen this design be very common and probably prevalent throughout the county because the cost of doing interior sprinkler systems is enormous. So a majority of these types of facilities fall short of 12,000 square feet. So as I stated, there will be a total of 9 additional buildings for a total of 19, with a conversion of the office building, a portion of it, into caretakers' facilities. These are some of the photos of the subject site. The applicant had originally expressed that the property was still heavily vegetated. However, as you can see, that's not the case, and based on the site visit, it's not the case. There is some vegetation, like I stated, along the eastern boundary adjacent to Old Highway 95, which we believe does meet the bare minimum requirements of Article 4.6 of the Kootenai County Land Use Development Code in terms of landscaping along public rights-of-ways. The applicant did state that they would have a 50-foot buffer on their site plan. That is not the case. I don't necessarily believe that we should enforce a 50-foot buffer as has been contemplated on the applicant's site plan, but I do believe for compatibility reasons, being that there are residential uses in the area predominantly to the west, we need to implement some level of landscaping. I don't know if alternative method of compliance is applicable because you can't utilize something that you don't have in place of the code requirements. I'd like to have Mr. MacArthur, the engineer of record, to provide clarification and how they plan to address this. I've been in contact with the property owner, Mr. William Nascimento, and we have had some communication, but staff does not feel that the explanation provided addresses the landscaping standards. I would like to put it on record that these are some additional photos looking south along Old Highway 95. These are some photos in the middle of the property looking north and northwest. I'd like to make it very clear that landscaping requirements or landscaping standards under Article 4.6 are not mandatory for rural zone or conditional use permits that are consistent with this request. They are a requirement, they are mandatory for commercial light industrial zones. However, staff believes that implementation of some bare minimum landscaping requirements is necessary to address potential compatibility concerns. Although we did not have any opposition, in fact, we don't have any comments on this project at all, which is rare, but it appears that because it's not an establishment of a new use, rather than an expansion of an existing use, that you wouldn't expect people to be up in arms or at least concerned about a compatibility of a new use in their area. Through the agency comment period, we did solicit comments from the Highway District, Kootenai Fire and Rescue. I'm sorry, my bad, it's supposed to be Northern Lakes. Northern Lakes Community Development Building Division and Panhandle Health District. None of the agencies had any real concerns. The fire district did want fire suppression requirements to be met. Building code required building permits for all new buildings, as well as site disturbance review and a separate building permit for conversion of the existing area within the office building into habitable space. As I stated, we received no comments. Based on review of the comp plan designation of suburban, we believe that the proposed facility and its expansion does support the existing residential developed in the area, and we believe that the proposal is in line with that comp plan designation. Therefore, we don't believe it's an issue from a compatibility standpoint, but we do feel like at the bare minimum requirements of landscaping needs to be addressed, as well as the building permit for the habitable space. We believe that needs to be addressed prior to issuance of any building permits, and we have that as a condition of approval in the staff report. I believe it's condition of approval 8.6, if I'm not mistaken. Other than that, I don't have any concerns with the proposal. We recommend approval, but we do want the conditions to be implemented based on our staff report recommendation. I stand for any questions that you have at this time.
I don't have any right now. Thanks, Vlad.
Put the site plan. Yeah, thank you. Sorry, that was me. Good evening, Scott MacArthur, MacArthur Engineering, here on behalf of the North Hayden Storage LLC project here tonight. I was also the engineer of record on the development of the original conditional use permit, and I did work with Mr. Finkel on that. It's kind of hard to follow that presentation, so I'm more so just going to hit some highlights, try not to be redundant. As Mr. Finkel pointed out, the landscape buffer, and I'll let you speak to our professional timber specialist, Russ McCaslin. He'll step up here in a moment, talk to you about the buffers. He's in charge of managing not just the proposed 50-foot buffers, but also the existing 50-foot buffers that were implemented as part of the original conditional use permit. Timber specialist with over 40 years experience. And so he's been managing those on site right now, and will continue to help us with reporting as the site is developed, so we can implement a plan that the county's happy with and the landscaping that's there. This is a proposed phased development, so this conditional use permit will be ongoing. It'll be developed in phases as the units are needed. So right now, I think there's at least 2 phases proposed on this plan. Depending on how that's selected and how it's constructed, we'll go through that process with the county through the site development process once the conditional use permit, knock on wood, is approved. The applicant has worked with the county to address some of the issues that are ongoing with the existing facility with respect to the caretaker portion of the office. That was converted, and they're going through some minor amendments to that office right now to address those issues. Just some minor adjustments. I think we're almost wrapped up there. And then I did forward the approved Panhandle Health District septic system updates to Mr. Finkel and Mr. Tarbutton recently, just showing that those conditions have been met through PhD for that caretaker facility. So those are up to date. We've had conversations with Northern Lakes Fire, Tyler Dreschel, and we've talked about the existing fire system. Right now, there's an existing fire pond that's located on the facility in this area right here. And that existing fire pond and the existing fire pump are sufficient enough to provide fire flow for the fire hydrants that'll be extended to serve this facility down here. So right now, you have existing hydrants and an existing fire line that runs north-south through the existing structures, or excuse me, east-west through the existing structures. And we want to make sure that we've addressed those conditions. And so we've already met with Tyler and discussed that with him, and we have documentation that will provide the county at the time of expansion that that existing fire suppression system is sufficient. And so, so that said, as Mr. Finkel mentioned, the structures themselves are less than 12,000 square feet, so they're not required to have fire suppression internally, but they will have other conditions that'll be analyzed at the time of building permits with respect to fire alarms and smoke detectors and those items, which obviously the owner will need. Like I said, Mr. Finkel's addressed the comments, pretty much takes the show away from me most of the time. I would like to bring Mr. Russ McCaslin up to discuss that buffer, because I think that's important to understand. I'm not a forester, and I know that the county is not a forester. We do agree that that proposed buffer and the time frame in which that buffer was implemented, it's a long process, and I can run you through it real fast. But the proposal for that 50-foot buffer remains. So there will be a 50-foot buffer as identified on this plan. The vegetation that's there or not there will be discussed by Mr. McCaslin. But how that occurred, and I guess I should just take a step back, is the original plan was for our firm to have this conditional use permit request in time. It was not submitted in time. The landowner had an opportunity to bring a contractor in to do the work on the property. We provided the county with a site disturbance permit to mass grade the property with not the intention of building this facility, but just to get the work done. Over the past couple of years, it's been difficult to find qualified contractors to perform the work. And so when one was present and the material was present to do the work, we immediately applied for a site disturbance permit to do that work. He did bring in professional foresters, loggers to remove the vegetation from the site. And as Mr. McCaslin will attest to, some of the vegetation on this property was beetle ridden or excuse me, was diseased. And I'll let him address that. But that's why the buffers were encroached upon, and you have some of that buffer missing, I guess, from that west side. So I'll let Mr. McCaslin talk to you about that more in depth. So that's pretty much all I have. Do you have any questions for me?
I'll wait until after we hear from you.
Okay.
First. Thanks.
Thank you. Russ McCaslin, retired forest manager, timberland manager, 47 years. William called me to, actually it was spring of 21, to help him manage his existing buffers around the existing storage units. They were falling down. Nothing had been done for years on those. And so we did. We took down the dead and die and the stuff that was leading the power lines. We got a little help out of Kootenai Power. They sent the crew down to take care of the trees that were destined for the power lines. That's pretty narrow, 50 feet. You have power lines on one side and you have the fence on the other. So anything leaning in and out has to be maintained. That stuff came down, we piled it. William didn't like the idea of burning, so we brought a chipper in and we chipped it back onto the floor of the buffer. So it's been highly maintained on the Ohio Match side. The highway buffer on the front of the new project has had the first phase of the maintenance done. What happened in there was, okay, we had, the prescription was to take anything that would hit the power lines again, or the new project had to be taken down at that point. So the logger was instructed to take anything I had not ribboned down. So if it had a chance of, if it had less than a third of a lean one direction, it was left alone. If it was 2/3 lean, it's got to come down. If it was leaning in the buffer, this way or that way, not going to damage anything on either side, it was left. So everything that could possibly be left from a forestry standpoint was left, excluding any vegetation on the ground. We don't know where we're at right now with tree count by square footage, anything like that. The rear buffer was completely cut because it had been harvested on the neighbor's side the year before, completely harvested, and they must have had a terrible bug problem because the buffer blew down. Yeah, I do have it. Sure. The buffer blew down into the new project area. And so the photos that William received, these satellite photos show the current condition of the buffers. That's the front page. And you can see a few green trees left. So what's missing is the condition of the buffer before we started.
She has to label it first, and then I get it.
It'll be entered as AC 1001.
Thank you.
So the satellite photos show clearly that the west buffer is pretty much, there's no timber left. There's a few green trees. So if you look at the photo on the back, you'll be able to point those green trees out between the dead ones. And so from an operational standpoint here, we're logging for the new operation. We're trying to get what we can economically out of that project and there's not much in logs these days.
Yeah.
Even with the mill straight next door for post and pole, they don't like the dead ones. So most of those dead ones ended up in a pulp pile that the logger got for free. And what was left is what we see today. And so we don't know yet what we have on the ground as far as natural regeneration. I see one of the first things on the requirement page that says natural regeneration. The use of native vegetation is encouraged. So we'll have to see what the condition of that back buffer is for native vegetation, and so we'll know how much to plant. The buffer along 95 has a lot of regeneration in it, tons of regeneration, natural regeneration coming up. I believe in 5 years you won't be seeing 6-8 feet through that, most of it.
And how about the vegetation between the existing development and your proposed new, where the swale is?
That's not
Is
part
that
of this.
healthy?
That is where they put a lot of material. I can maybe speak to this.
Oh, sorry. This
Yeah.
area here,
Yeah,
there's a proposed access through there.
yeah,
But that vegetation, a lot of this is natural in this particular area, and then landscaped, professionally landscaped through the frontage here,
yeah.
and then back through there. There won't be much of a buffer between the two developments. What's remaining here, I believe, will be maintained as shown in this.
It's a drainage ditch.
There's a drainage buffer. It's a man-made drainage buffer. But just a separation between the two should not be.
Okay, because
There's a-
these photos show that there are some trees.
There are trees in there. They'll be maintained as part of that.
Okay,
I mean, maintain as long as you can maintain a tree, you know, whether you get the wind storms will knock them down and whatnot, and that's where Mr. McCaslin's expertise steps in, so.
These buffers will always need to be maintained. Yeah, last year we maintained the Ohio match site, and there's already a few trees in there that are leaned and ready to come down.
I noticed a few down, yeah.
Yeah.
Vlad?
If I may add additional information, I think it would help clarify a few things. When Mr. MacArthur submitted the original CUP, I believe he had Mr. Arms, the wetland biologist, do the analysis on that mainly drainage, and there was a requirement for a minimum of 5-foot buffer along the ordinary high water mark of that drainage. Subsequent to that, through a minor subdivision process, I believe there was a 20-foot buffer placed on the face of plat that should retain in its natural state. So we would ask, I wanted to clarify, I believe I did not speak to that, but the access to the proposed expansion will remain the same off of Highway 95. As Mr. MacArthur stated, the driveway within the property itself will be constructed heading south through that drainage area. So it's our understanding that minor improvements within the buffer area that are depicted on the face of plat, underlying plat, creating these 3 lots, should be maintained with the exception of the area that will be disturbed for the driveway. So we would ask that the applicant retain as much of the tree vegetation area along the drainage outside of the proposed driveway area. So we do not wish to have the vegetation that's shown on the aerial photo be disturbed any more than what's necessary for the driveway. We want to make that clear, and I'd like to see if Mr. MacArthur or McCassell can testify to that they will only remove the vegetation adjacent to the drainage that's necessary for the driveway for the expended use, and no more vegetation will be removed.
There shouldn't be any reason to remove any more vegetation from that area.
Understood. That's all we wanted to make sure that, is that accurate?
Okay. Okay, I do have a few questions.
Okay.
Some of them are just out of my own curiosity, and some of them are my concern. So there's a high demand, yes, for these kinds of storage units. Is the current development fully rented? And I assume these are rental, not owned?
These are rentals, yes.
Okay,
And currently, I mean, it goes in and out, but yes, I believe they're fully rented. Usually during the wintertime, you see a peak use for rentals. So I'm not sure of his existing capacity, but I know that it's hard to find a storage unit in this area. So I would guess that it's entirely rented, yes.
these other phases, are they, in terms of massing, height, and bulk, similar to these?
Similar structures.
Because I think the thing that is kind of surprising to me when I drive out that way is all of a sudden there's a lot of structure, right? And in certain angles, they blend so that you're looking as if you're seeing, just under 12,000 square feet times 10, 120,000 square foot, single building.
Mm-hmm.
And then you add these others, and you're going to have the same, except expanded. Certain angles, it's going to look like you've massed an awful lot of building. So the importance of the trees and the buffers in trying to break some of that up, I think is really critical.
Oh, it definitely, that's why we proposed, that was part of our original proposal when we brought this forward under the original conditional use permit, was to maintain that buffer for that very reason. Even though to the north of that existing permit is a gravel pit.
Yeah.
And then some residential properties. But all of those neighbors have been complimentary as to what we've preserved and what we've done. And I can only compliment the developer, the new owner, the developer of this conditional use permit phase, on bringing in somebody like Mr. McCaslin to maintain those buffers. Because a lot of times what will happen, and I see what was happening originally with those 50-foot buffers, you would get the trees that would fall down, you would get the leaners, you would get the thick vegetation that creates fire fuels. It becomes more of a nuisance than a actual visual protection. It needs to be preserved and maintained. And so having Mr. Nascimento, the owner of this facility, bring this in and have somebody maintain those buffers, not just have a buffer, but maintain the buffers, that's important to us too, because I feel that's where you're gonna get the real benefit of the buffer, and you're gonna see that natural growth that is protected and provides not just, site obscurity, but it provides that aesthetically pleasing site obscurity. So, and I think that's where he's trying to show the county, I'm not just cooperating with what I tell you I'm gonna do, I'm going above and beyond by having somebody maintain it.
Yeah, he's made quite an investment already in maintaining these buffers along Ohio Match and 95. Mm-hmm. The rear buffer, the west side buffer that blew down, we're just dealing with what we were dealt with there, with the blow down and the bug kill and trying to get it out of there. That's what we're left with. But we need to assess that and see where we go from here, from a maintenance or planting or to meet the standards we need.
And to the west, this buffer along here, we'll analyze that. We're providing that buffer as part of the plan, and we'll analyze and we'll meet whatever landscape requirements we can agree upon with the county at the time of development, whatever conditions that are implemented for that buffer that are needed to the west, because I believe The parcel directly to the west that maybe 7/8 of the property adjoins is an expansion of the lodge pole facility to the south, the pole and post facility to the south. So it'll have a similar industrial type use. So providing that 50-foot buffer is great for the natural vegetation to grow, but to be maintained as a visual site obscurity might not be as instrumental. But again, it's important that we're providing it and you have somebody there that can do that.
And right now, we're doing the best from a forestry standpoint that we can do with these buffers, the best that we can do. And that's get down the stuff that needs to come down now. Chip it, whatever, and get it, and chip, I like chipping because it puts it back into the forest floor.
Right.
It encourages growth. There's a lot of growth out there, a lot of regeneration out there.
That's good.
Yeah.
The caretaker home, facility, whatever, so there hasn't previously been a 24/7 presence?
I believe the original intent was to not have that. The original owner implemented that as part of, after the fact, they made it an apartment. They were staying there on and off and while they were trying to build a home. And I think it turned into more of a caretaker type facility where it was the owner living there during the time they were trying to build a home. And so when the property changed hands, that wasn't even a thought. It wasn't even, okay, we'll just move forward. So we moved forward with the modification to the original CUP, not even thinking that had become an apartment. That wasn't something that even crossed our mind because it wasn't an issue. It hadn't become an issue. And then the county brought it to our attention and we're like, oh, I guess this never was. It was always just an office space. And the way it was designed and laid out, it was the architectural plans and the building plans that were submitted for that structure. It was an office with it had two offices and a great room. And that basically was converted into like a studio type apartment. And so it's now being implemented. It's been analyzed by the county. They're adjusting some windows, is my knowledge, to get away from certain, they're relocating the generator. They're doing whatever they need to do to bring that into conformance. And like I said, PhD's already approved the septic system, and that's been forwarded to the county as well. So they have that information. So they're taking the new owner's taking the proper steps to rectify that situation that he adopted, or inherited, I guess.
But the plan is to have someone living on site?
Potentially, I believe that's his plan, just security.
Yeah.
Having somebody there available
Yeah.
at all times.
So presently, people who have rented those storage units can get in and out themselves with a code,
Correct.
24/7?
Yep. And this has been a model, this project itself, I think I've been in front of you for quite a few of these. This has been a model project throughout the county. A lot of people will come to this facility and say, I want to do this over here, I want to do this over here. And so we didn't know what we were doing when we got started. We were, creating something that I think has turned out to be, I mean, we knew what we were doing, but we didn't know what was going to come from it. So there are a lot of successful projects out there that have this same layout in mind, fire suppression, the office space, the storage facility, the gated access. And this was all the brainchild of the former owner, really. So I think this is a great expansion project that the new owners have. And I think, like I said, it blends well, especially with the natural buffers that will be maintained and enhanced. Because when we originally saw those natural buffers, they needed some enhancement, as Mr. McCaslin said. So.
And they need some growth now, too.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So do we have anyone on Zoom, since it doesn't appear that we have any members of the public present?
We do. It is the applicant, Mr. Nascimento. So, William, if you'd like to go ahead and unmute yourself, the floor is yours.
I hope everyone can hear me. Can you hear me okay?
It's a little bit quiet. Is there something you can do with the volume to?
You guys hear me now? Is that better?
That's better.
Okay. Well, first and foremost, to the hearing examiner, thank you very much for entertaining our proposal. And I want to thank Mr. Finkel and Mr. Taverton for all the help and advice they've given us in getting to this point. And obviously, I would like to thank Scott and Russ for being there on my behalf and, supporting the proposal and putting together the necessary paperwork and the necessary technical background to support the project. I do want to thank the county. We purchased the facility about 2.5 years ago. The facility is full. It's always been full. We have a waiting list, and we've never had any vacancy. And so it's a very popular facility. It's very well liked. It's very well cared for. We maintain a very clean and high-end facility. The former owner, Michelle Hebert, the wife of the gentleman that Scott MacArthur was discussing, is my manager. She takes really good care of the facility because it's kind of like her own. And so we've never had any problems, and we've tried to do a good job. Really love the area. It's a great area, and we are providing a service that we have very good reviews on Google. If you looked at that, we just try to do an excellent job. And so we have a high demand. That's why we're expanding. And we were able to acquire back those parcels on the south and be able to expand the facility. I just want to mention with regard to the buffer, we did have a surveyor actually outline the 50-foot buffer all the way around. And as everyone has explained, on the west side, the buffer had some fallen trees and these trees, and so that was taken out. We're willing to plant back evergreens to recreate the buffer, and then along Ohio Match, along Highway 95, as Russ has mentioned, there's a lot of new growth coming up, and we hope in the next few years that will fill out to the point that I mentioned that it's more filled out, and you won't even see much of the buildings as you drive by. With that, I'm here to answer any questions. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to a successful hearing and then approval to continue and proceed with the expansion project. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else on Zoom who wishes to speak?
Nobody else?
Okay, gentlemen, any final comments? Then that concludes our hearing this evening on CUP 22-0006. Thank you very much.